Ecuador's Interior Minister Maria Paula Romo has been impeached by the country's National Assembly for her responsibility for police repression during widespread protests in October 2019. The head of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said Tuesday that a COVID-19 vaccine will likely be rolled out by mid-December. The Syrian army on Tuesday denounced a suspected Israeli launch of an aerial strike at South Damascus. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, I'm Gladys Quesada. Ecuador's Interior Minister Maria Paula Romo has been impeached by the country's National Assembly for her responsibility in the police repression against thousands of citizens during widespread protests in October 2019. 104 lawmakers voted in favor of the impeachment, 18 voted against, and there were 12 abstentions. Romo was accused of allowing the use of expired tear gas canisters by police and authorizing their excessive use of force against demonstrators who took to the streets of the capital, Quito, for 11 consecutive days in October 2019 to protest against the increase in fuel prices and other economic policies that President Lenín Moreno's administration was attempting to implement in order to secure a loan from the International Monetary Fund. Data from the Office of the Ombudsman of Ecuador has revealed that the excessive use of police force caused at least 11 deaths, while over 1,300 people were injured and over 1,000 detained. In Bolivia, the Departmental Prosecutor's Office of Cochabamba ordered the arrest of the military commander for his alleged links to the Hualayani massacre in 2019. The prosecutor's office ordered the arrest of the departmental commander of the Army's Strategic Operations Command, Alfredo Cuellar, for the crime of murder. Cuellar was investigated for his participation in the killings of at least 10 people at the Hualayani Bridge in Sacaba as security forces violently repressed demonstrators who mobilized against the coup that undertaken against former President Evo Morales in November 2019. Investigations revealed that groups of military personnel fired chemical agents and projectiles at demonstrators. The commander's lawyer, Edwin Paredes, claimed that Cuellar had only exercised administrative functions. The Nicaraguan government foresees economic damages of more than $742 million following the passage of Hurricanes Ida and Iota. According to preliminary reports from the Ministry of Finance and Public Credit, the impact of the weather events could result in a 6.2% contraction in gross domestic product. The authorities noted that the losses caused by Hurricane Ida alone have been evaluated at $178 million. Among the most affected sectors are the road network, with losses of almost $350 million, while housing and health center infrastructure present a combined loss of $138 million. Brazil has now surpassed 6 million confirmed COVID-19 cases as its hospitals are overwhelmed with the influx of patients. The South American country, which ranks third in the world in terms of the number of cases reported, is seeing a worrying growth in infections, and many experts believe it could be entering a second wave of the epidemic. Brazil ranks second in the world in terms of its COVID-19 death toll, which now stands at over 169,000, only surpassed by the United States. Far-right President Jair Bolsonaro has faced widespread criticism for his mishandling of the crisis and his downplaying of the virus as just a little flu. Protests continue in Guatemala as diverse sectors mobilize to demand the resignation of President Alejandro Giammattei. Workers, student movements and civil society organizations held protests in various parts of the country to demand the president's resignation following Congress approval of the budget for 2021, which foresees cuts to spending on health, education and human rights, and an increase in public debt, which demonstrators stress is unsustainable. Meanwhile, indigenous communities representatives gathered in the central plaza of the capital to support the demands voiced by social movements and organizations. On Monday, the Congress announced it was suspending the final ratification process for the budget in the face of widespread protest.
Join the others in calling for the resignation of the entire executive branch, not only of the president, but also of the ministers, because they are all the same. If the president does not take us into account, then I believe that we will act so the population has its say. Last Saturday's demonstration was a clear message to the political class that they cannot continue to take decisions against the interest of the majority. It is worth nothing that, unfortunately, it broke out of the control of the security forces and many people were repressed.
In Paraguay, the rural workers' movement is mobilizing in the capital to demand that the government of President Mario Abdo Benitez to fulfill the agreements reached on economic redistribution. The national coordinator that groups rural workers' organizations explained that the mobilization seeks to exert pressure so that the executive fulfills the established agreements regarding the cancellation of debt, the reactivation of family agricultural projects, land titles for landless rural workers, and subsidies for producers affected by the drought. In this sense, President Mario Abdo Benitez claimed that his administration has already fulfilled its obligations by transferring some $25 million from the Ministry of Public Works to the Ministry of Agriculture for projects aimed at benefiting rural workers.
Here, we do not see the will of the government to support an important sector: farmers, rural workers, indigenous people, who have historically been abandoned, excluded from society. This is why we return and ratify our position. We say that this commitment to the people must be fulfilled, because it is a disgrace that today they sign an agreement and tomorrow they ignore it.
And we'll be right back after this very short break, so don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. The head of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention said Tuesday that a COVID-19 vaccine will likely be rolled out by mid-December. Dr. Robert Redfield told Fox News that the shot will be probably distributed first to nursing home residents and then healthcare workers, followed by high-risk individuals. He announced that those decisions and on the rollout of the federal-approved COVID-19 vaccine are in the process of being finalized. U.S. Food and Drug Administration officials are currently reviewing an application for an emergency approval of Pfizer's vaccine, which the company said was 95.5% effective in clinical trials. The biotech firm Moderna is also likely to soon apply for permission for this vaccine, which the firm says is about 95% effective. According to a spokesperson for the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, U.S. President-elect Joe Biden will begin receiving the classified presidential daily briefing. Receiving a classified intelligence briefing is typically one of the first rights of a presidential candidate after winning the election. The formal White House approval for Biden to receive the president's daily brief comes 3 weeks after the election, as President Donald Trump's refusal to accept his defeat delayed the start and the normal transition process. It follows a formal notice by the General Services Administration on Monday, and that the formal transition of government can proceed. And the British Prime Minister announced Tuesday that the coronavirus restrictions on social mixing and travel will be eased across the United Kingdom over Christmas to allow up to 3 households to celebrate the festive season together. In a video message, Prime Minister Boris Johnson set out rules enabling families to meet in Christmas, also in Christmas bubbles with up to 2 other households between December 23rd and 27th, according to a joint statement by the governments of all of 4 UK nations: England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. The 4 constituent nations manage separate health policies and have had varying restrictions in place against the coronavirus pandemic. In England, a 4-week lockdown is due to end on December the 2nd, and the country will revert to regionalized restrictions depending on the number of cases in different parts of the country, including curbs on travel into and out of virus hotspots. However, over the Christmas period, all curbs on travel will be lifted UK-wide, despite the large numbers of infections and deaths and widespread criticism of the government's handling of the crisis. French President Emmanuel Macron announced their aim to lift a nationwide lockdown on December 15, with shops authorized to reopen as early as Saturday after weeks of closure. In a televised address on Tuesday, Macron said some restrictions will remain in place to avoid the resurgence of the virus and the threat of another lockdown. He noted that while the spread of the virus had slowed, it is still very much present. Only moments before the president's address, France's health agency reported 458 new COVID-19 related fatalities over the past 24 hours, taking the total past 50,000. But according to health authorities, the second wave of the epidemic reached its peak last week, with numbers of new infections, new hospital admissions, and new intensive care patients all falling, while the number of fatalities has established. Macron also said that he hoped that the first COVID-19 vaccines will be available for use by the end of December or early January.
We will then be able to take new opening decisions, if possible, around January the 20th, if the number of contamination remains below 5,000 cases per day. Sport halls and restaurants will be able to reopen and the curfew can be postponed. Cinemas, theaters and museums will be able to resume their activities, always within the framework of the health protocols that have been negotiated, and a time-stamping system will make it possible to organize performances at the end of the day. At this point, I would like to say how much I thank and support all those involved in culture, whom I know we have asked so much of.
Authorities on Tuesday ordered an investigation into the forceful removal by police of a camp of asylum seekers in central Paris that prompted outrage over the brutal tactics used. Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin said he had agreed to a proposal by the Paris police chief to immediately refer the issue to the National Police Inspectorate General, which investigates officers' conduct. The government is already facing a storm of criticism over new security legislation being debated in Parliament that opponents said will erode the accountability of the police. Officers used tear gas to break out in the Paris camp, which was set up to protest against earlier forced evacuations of hundreds of asylum seekers from other camps. Volunteers had helped erect about 500 blue tents at Republic Square that were quickly filled with the majority of people coming from Afghanistan. A small group of protesters clashed with police near Republic Square in Paris on Tuesday night after a rally in support of asylum seekers and to denounce the forcible evacuation of the camp set up to house the then by riot police on Monday. The violence move has sparked widespread outrage among those supporting the right of people to seek refuge in France. And Spain's constitutional court has upheld the ban on the separatist president of Catalonia's regional government, Quim Torra, from holding public office. The court rejected the appeal for the provisional lifting of the ban requested by Torra, arguing that it will imply not only the suspension of the execution of a sentence, but it will also override one of the legal consequences of a sentence that has already been executed and imply a serious breach of a constitutional unprotected interest, such as the guarantee of the exercise of of action by public authorities, in this case the judiciary. Spain's Supreme Court previously upheld the decision to ban Torra from holding public office after he was found guilty of disobeying a court order to remove a pro-independence symbol from a government building ahead of last year's general election. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break, so stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The Syrian army on Tuesday denounced a suspected Israeli launch of an aerial strike at South Damascus. According to a denouncement made by military authorities, the Israeli aerial strike on a strategic area that Israel had hit in the past came from the occupied Golan Heights and caused material damages. The attack struck a military base in Jabal Main Heights near the town of Kishwa, where Iranian Revolutionary Guards have long been entrenched in a rugged area almost 15 kilometers south of the center of Damascus. In Palestine, Israeli occupation forces repressed a demonstration against the annexation of new territories north of the Jordan Valley, leaving thousands of Palestinian civilians wounded. A large Israeli military force violently dispersed the participants of the rally, organized against the Israeli occupation authorities' plan to annex the site of the demolished Kirbet Humsa al-Faqwa village at the larger Jordan Valley. Soldiers launched tear gas canisters and stun grenades at protesters as they reached the TeleSUR military checkpoint east of Tuba city, which was closed in advance, causing dozens to suffocate due to inhaling the toxic gas. 6 protesters sustained injuries after being directly hit with tear gas canisters in the feet, head, and abdomen. Israeli troops also showered journalists with tear gas canisters as means to prevent them from covering the events. According to the UN Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, so far in 2020, Israeli forces have demolished 689 structures across the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, more than any full year since 2016, leaving over 800 Palestinians homeless. At a virtual global donor conference for Afghanistan this Tuesday, hosted from the UN in Geneva, donors demanded an immediate ceasefire as they pledged around $12 billion in aid over 4 years. Representatives of the international community called for immediate, permanent and comprehensive ceasefire, and donors tied their monies to civil rights being upheld in peace talks with the Taliban. The conference came as at least 14 people were killed and dozens wounded in central Afghanistan when 2 blasts ripped through the historic city of Bamiyan this Tuesday. The twin bombing marked the latest big attack in Afghanistan, where violence has surged in recent months, even as Taliban and Afghan government negotiators are meeting for peace talks in Qatar. There was no immediate claim of responsibility and the Taliban denied any involvement. Donor nations gather every 4 years to pledge aid to Afghanistan, which is almost entirely reliant on foreign assistance thanks to years of conflict following the United States invasion of the country in 2001.
Today, the countries expressed their commitment to this significant support by pledging over $3 billion for the year 2021. But as said, there are conditions. Assuming annual commitments are expected to stay in the same level for the 4-year period in total, then this would mean that $12 million. The decision on continuation of aid at comparable level will be reviewed against the government's progress in the key reform areas.
We stand with you and support you in very concrete financial terms, as we saw today. We stand with you as you move towards stability and a more prosperous future and your rightful place within the region of South Asia and Central Asia being able to contribute the way a country with such richness, such diversity, such incredible human capital can contribute.
We will not be the ones creating obstacles to the peace process. We will be the ones with full commitment and strong political will to enable the peace process to move ahead. And I hope the Taliban will have the courage to come out and show the same level of commitment to peace.
A consultative meeting of Libyan lawmakers aimed at unifying the divided Libyan parliament, currently split in two rival parts based in the Tripoli and Tobruk, started in Tangiers, Morocco, on Tuesday with the participation of more than 100 members representing different political factions. The meeting, which will run until November 25, is the first of its kind and is to set the agenda for another official session of the Libyan House of Representatives to be held in Libya with the hope of resolving the political crisis and restoring sovereignty and stability to the country.
We are working on publishing or agreeing on an agenda to return to Libya and hold an official session in which the presidency of the House of Representatives, in which the presidency of the House of Representatives will be changed, in which also the internal regulations will be published, and the House of Representatives will be organized and unified and bring Libya out of the political crisis.
We are in Tangiers in the Kingdom of Morocco to unite the House of Representatives, which has in fact been launched since yesterday. And we are in consultative meetings in order to gather points of view and also to erase some mistakes among some colleagues.
All our meetings are consultative and unofficial to agree to find a way to meet in one of the Libyan cities, and probably it will be Gadames or Sirte, and there we will start our official meetings inside Libya.
And we have come to the end of this news brief, but remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. Also, if you feel so inclined, join us and follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For TeleSUR English, I'm Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.